Welcome to IDEA, Understanding Measurable Goals on the IEP. This webinar, which is about 15 minutes long, is designed to give you a brief, close-up look at one section of the IEP, Measurable Annual Goals. You could kind of consider it a short course. We hope you will use other PACER resources for a more in-depth understanding of the IEP and the whole special education process. It can really make a difference for your child. This presentation will give you some background information on goals and then 6 examples of goals for children with different disabilities. I just want to give you an idea of who is talking with you on this webinar and sharing this information with you. I've worked at PACER for about 16 years and I'm the parent of 2 adult children with disabilities. I did a lot of work on the IEP by authoring a guide for Minnesota parents to the IEP booklet that PACER has available. The IEP has a number of required components. In this webinar, we're going to focus on measurable annual goals. You will hear the term measurable often. It's the essential characteristic of a goal. So what makes something measurable? We might ask, what would one do to see if a child has accomplished this goal? We use measuring cups, gas gauges, shoe sizers, report cards to measure other things. So what are we going to do in this case to measure? Secondly, progress must be observable or countable. Instead of becoming independent, we might say dressing independently. Or instead of improved speaking ability, we might say speak in 1 or 2 word sentences. You can see how the second example of each of these is observable and countable. Third, would everyone measure the same or come to the same conclusion? A goal needs to be specific enough that observers or measurers know what they are measuring and will be able to be consistent. And last, we must be able to say how much progress has been made since the last measurement. Think about it. How would you measure improvement or success or wise choices or increased independence or appropriate level or closer to her peers who do not have a disability? We need to be much more specific so that goals and progress can be measured. And be careful of percentages. We often see them in goals, but here's an example. Rose will cross the street safely 80% of the time. This makes a point. Sometimes we need 100%. So let's start with a brief overview. IDEA, the federal special education law, requires that IEP teams use the areas listed on this slide to develop the IEP. Consideration of all of these areas is mandatory, even though you won't necessarily find all of them on your IEP form. So the schools will use evaluation data, which is usually the school evaluation data, but parents can bring in additional information. The present level of performance in various areas, and be sure to include and understand the ending level of performance on last year's goals. Strengths. From your experience as a parent, what works well for your child? What strengths does your child have that we could build on this school year? Educational concerns of the parent are also very important to consider annually. Results of assessments, this can be state and district-wide assessments, and other special factors such as assistive technology, vision or hearing loss, and behavior. If discussion of any of these things results in a service, intervention, or modification, that's what must be written on the IEP, often in the present levels section, but it could be in other areas of the IEP as well. Now let's talk a minute about the present level section. This includes the impact of the disability on participation in regular or general education. So it's the present level performance where your child is at in various areas like reading and math and behavior and so forth, but also how your child's disability has an impact on their performance. So for example, does your child's autism affect his social skills in the classroom? How does your child's 3rd grade reading ability affect her 7th grade science? Your child has ADHD. Is his locker disorganized? How does this affect his grades? Or Your child's speech is hard to understand. How do his classmates communicate in their small group? In other words, we want to think about what skills or behavior changes are necessary so your child can participate in and make meaningful educational progress in the general education curriculum and in other identified need areas. As we just said, what skill or behavior needs to change so the child can make progress in the general education curriculum or other appropriate educational activities? So here in the first 4 bullets, just notice these questions. The goal should identify what specific skill or behavior needs to change, what level your child is at now in this particular skill or behavior. The team will decide how much your child can reasonably accomplish in 1 year, and how will that performance be measured. So just looking at those bullets, I'm going to read you an example and you can kind of follow along. So an actual goal example might be, given instruction, the student will increase written language skills. So we've named the skill or behavior, in this case it's written language skills, from writing only phrases, so that's the present level where the child is at now, to writing complete simple sentences as measured by weekly writing samples. So we know the team has decided what this child can reasonably accomplish in 1 IEP year and how that performance will be measured. In Minnesota, each IEP goal must have at least 2 objectives or benchmarks, which are steps to accomplish that goal. Before we move on to some specific goal examples, I want to spend just a little bit of time looking at IEP progress reporting. The IEP has a box that will say how often, frequency, and by what method IEP progress will be given to parents. So how often, this is determined by how often children at that school receive report cards. So for example, if children at Pineview Elementary get 4 report cards, then your child would get 4 report cards and 4 IEP progress reports. This little box on the IEP will also say by what method, and it could be a variety of methods. It could be by phone, could be in writing, it could be at a meeting, but you as a parent should know how and when you are getting these progress reports. When you get the report, it should give you the progress level of your child on each goal, but also it should tell you at this rate of progress, will the child achieve the goal by the end of the IEP year? This is a very important consideration because the school is required to call a meeting if there is a lack of expected progress. Although the general education report cards do not show up on the IEP, IDEA calls for children with special education needs that they be able to make progress in the general curriculum. If a child is not making progress in the general education curriculum, the IEP team needs to determine why and what they will do about it that's appropriate for this child. So it's important to pay attention to regular report cards and participate in conferences so that you can get this regular education information as well. So now we're going to take a look at about 6 different real-life examples. They're not actual children, but they're a composite of kids that we've dealt with at Pacer. So for each child, we're going to look a little bit of evaluation or present level information, educational need, a goal, maybe an objective, and talk about progress reporting. So let's start with Cassie. This particular child, Cassie, attends an early childhood program. She's between the ages of birth to 3. These children have IFSPs, Individualized Family Service Plans. So the goals are developed a little bit differently, as you can see on this slide. The progression from the major goal or outcome to success is very logical. So we have the goal and why this goal is important for this child, what's already happening, that's the present level of performance, and we'll know we're successful when. So in this case, Cassie will learn to sit up independently because then she can participate with her peers in age-appropriate play activities. Right now, When placed in a sitting position, Cassie can sit for 1 minute. But in one IEP or one IFSP year, we will know that we're successful when Cassie is able to place herself in a sitting position and maintain it for 3 minutes, so that you can see that this goal is very measurable. The following goals for the next 5 kids are examples of students above the age of 3. So looking at Bill, we know that Bill's math skills are below average, or this is what the statement says in the present level section of his IEP. So his math skills are below average for his grade level and below his expected level of achievement. He struggles with multiplication and division and often becomes anxious in math class. So what skills or behavior does Bill need to learn? The need here shows that it's identifying math skills, but his anxiety might also be an issue for Bill. Is there anything else that we might need to know about Bill that's not here? Note that below average for his grade level and below his expected level of achievement are not very specific. But let's look at the goal. This might give us more information. In this particular goal, Bill will increase his math skills in the areas of multiplication and division from. So you see that blank there. This is where the specific information might be. So it's from what level to what level as measured by what. So we know that in this case, the specific levels are here in the goal. Now in some cases, maybe Bill's multiplication ability and his division ability might be very different. So he might need 2 goals, or they might be broken down in objectives, as in this case, because this objective is just for multiplication. So Bill will increase his fluency or speed and accuracy in multiplication on grade level materials from, and here we have more specific information that can be measured, in this case by the weekly quizzes. So when Bill's parents get the IEP progress report, each time they're going to want to look at what progress is Bill making, in this case in multiplication and division, but broken down even further, probably into one objective for multiplication and another for division. And these goals always assume that the goal statement could be given instruction, Bill will increase his math skills. If that statement isn't there, we assume that the way Bill is going to increase these math skills is through instruction. Next, let's look at Lisa. Lisa has ADHD with poor organizational skills. She completes and turns in only 50% of her assignments. She's academically at grade level, but she's failing 2 classes due to missing assignments. So we can easily see that the educational need, at least one of them, based on this statement, is to improve the frequency of handing in assignments. So her goal is to increase the frequency of turning in assignments from 50% to 80% as measured by core academic teacher reports to the IEP case manager on a weekly basis. So this IEP team decided that in one IEP year it was reasonable to give an instruction that to assume that, or to plan that Lisa would be able to increase the turning in of her assignments from 50% to 80%. To give you an example of a benchmark, this team divided it into time periods. So by the end of the first quarter, Lisa will hand in 60% of her homework. So when the parents get the first IEP progress report, they can see where she's actually at. So the progress, let's say the progress is that all of a sudden now she's down at 40%. Well, something's going on. So the team might have to meet to say, wow, she's not really going in the right direction. Do we need some different instructions, some different strategies? What do we need to do? Because Lisa needs to make progress on turning in these assignments. Or we might find, wow, something happened and Lisa's really on top of it now. Maybe the strategy that we used is really working and she's already up to 85%. So it's really important that you pay attention to the progress reports and see what needs to happen next for your child. Let's take a look at John. John has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It affects his moods, which range from irritable and depressed to manic. He can be impulsive and physically aggressive. It's worse when he's tired, hungry, overstimulated, or frustrated. Physical aggression occurs an average of 3 times per week. So in this case, the team has decided that the educational need is that John needs to be able to monitor and control his behavior so that he can participate in and benefit from the general education curriculum with his peers. So for a goal, this team decided that John's going to be taught some self-control strategies to decrease the frequency of physical aggression to 0 times per week. So remember, the beginning level is 3 times a week. We see that in the present level. And his goal now is to decrease that to 0 times per week as measured by the IEP case manager reports. So for one of the objectives, John will be able to verbally identify 3 self-control strategies as recorded by the teacher, so that when he's being taught these self-control strategies, one of the first steps in this objective is that he can verbally identify those strategies. And I would assume that some of the further objectives would be that he would be actually able to use those strategies. So again, progress is going to be really important to note. Where is he now? He started at 3 times a week. The goal is 0 times a week. As you get each progress report, you want to see how many times a week John is having those events. Jose was recently diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism. He does not yet understand autism nor how this disability affects him. He frequently resists leaving an unfinished project when it's time to move on to the next project. So we can see that for Jose, one of the impacts of his disability, his form of autism, is that he's having problems leaving an unfinished project. But he doesn't know that this particular difficulty that he's having is related to autism. So the educational need is Jose needs to understand Asperger's syndrome and how it impacts his daily life. So the goal in this case is that Jose will increase his knowledge of Asperger's syndrome from his current level of minimum knowledge, remember he was just diagnosed, to be able to list 3 ways that it impacts his daily life. So one of the objectives then would be, given a discussion about autism, Jose will list 3 accommodations he needs at school. So some of these accommodations could relate to the unfinished projects that we read about in the present level. So these accommodations could include such things as a timer, 5-minute warning, or knowledge of a specific time when he can finish the project. So we want to, again, look at his progress as often as these progress reports come to you as parents. How is he doing now in understanding Asperger's and understanding how it impacts him? And in this objective, does he know 3 accommodations that he needs at school? Finally, let's take a look at an older student. Beginning during the 9th grade, students enter a period called transition, and goals are developed a little bit differently. So in this case, Angie is 17 and in the 12th grade. She reads at the 3rd grade level. Her understanding of abstract concepts is poor. She has a basic understanding of math but difficulty with money, and she plans to live independently someday. So all of these things are developed understanding what Angie wants and where she's at now. So in this case, we can see that there's a whole variety of areas that are identified in this present level statement. There's reading, there's abstract concepts, there's math, there's money, and there's independent living. So one of the needs is to increase Angie's independent living skills, she needs to learn how to plan a meal. The IEP team will use Angie's preferences, interests, and long-term goals as priorities of which areas to address. The transition team will list the post-secondary, which means long-term or after high school goals, and then break that down into an annual goal each year to help the student achieve the long-term goals. So in this case, the long-term post-secondary goal that Angie wants is that after high school, I will live in an apartment in the community with friends and know how to plan and cook meals. That's her long-term goal. So this year, the IEP team decided for a measurable annual goal that Angie will plan a cost-effective meal for 4 consecutive weeks. So breaking this down further, the objective is, or one of the objectives is, given Meals Made Easy cookbook, Angie will pick recipes, plan a menu, and write it in her menu planner for 4 weeks. And you can see that when Angie is doing these things, she'll be reading, she'll probably be doing math, there might even be some abstract concepts, but it's all very practical. It's to do with learning to cook so that she can accomplish her long-term post-secondary goal of living in an apartment in the community. And again, the progress can be measured. Schools are required to put in a good faith effort. Things that are written in the IEP must be provided. But a given level of progress is not a guarantee. So if the child is not making expected progress, when you look at the IEP progress reports, report cards, results of state and district assessments, and so forth, if the child is not making expected progress, the IEP team must meet to address this, because meaningful educational progress is the key to a free, appropriate public education. In summary, according to IDEA, this quote is from the Federal Special Education Law, the purpose of special education is to prepare children to lead productive and independent adult lives to the maximum extent appropriate. So, when you look at your child's goals, you can ask yourself every year, will these goals help my child move towards a productive and independent life? As I stated at the beginning, this webinar was simply about measurable IEP goals. There are a lot more information at Pacer Center through our website. One of the handouts that you might want to take a look at is called A Place to Start. It gives a lot more information on the present level statements. The U.S. Department of Education also has lots of good information at the IDEA website. The Minnesota Department of Education also has resources on their website. Thank you for joining me for this presentation, and we hope that you will contact Pacer if you have a need of further information and resources. Thanks.